She was building a shelter with broken boards. The rancher watched from afar, then rode over with lumber. The sun was high in the sky, beating down on the wide, dry fields that stretched beyond the horizon. Dust rose with every step, swirling around in little spirals as the wind passed. In the middle of the field, a young woman was busy working on a makeshift shelter. The boards she had were old, some broken, some warped, and none of them fit together perfectly. She moved quickly, hammering one board after another into place, her hands raw and calloused from the work. Sweat ran down her back, soaking the fabric of her worn shirt, but she did not stop. Every nail she drove, every board she adjusted, was a small step toward creating a place she could call her own, even if it was temporary. She paused for a moment, wiping her forehead with the back of her dusty hand, and looked at the shelter she was building. It was uneven, crooked in some places, and the roof sagged slightly, but it had character. It had potential. She ran her fingers along the rough wood, checking if the boards were secure. One plank shifted under her touch, making her frown. She picked up another nail and hit it carefully into the board, testing its stability. The structure seemed to hold for now, but she knew she would have to reinforce it later. She took a deep breath and stepped back, surveying her work. Despite the heat and the sweat, she felt a sense of pride. She had come here with almost nothing, yet she was making something that could shelter her from the harsh sun and perhaps later from the cold nights. From a distance, someone watched her. A rancher riding along the edge of his land had spotted her hours ago. At first, he thought she might be a traveler passing through, but as he watched, he realized she was staying here, building something permanent, or as permanent as the boards would allow. He slowed his horse, curious but cautious. There was something about her determination that caught his attention. She didn't look like someone who would ask for help easily. She worked with quiet focus, every movement deliberate. Even when a board slipped or a nail bent, she didn't show frustration. Instead, she paused, considered her options, and tried again. It reminded him of people he had known who could endure hard work and uncertainty with patience. It was a rare quality. The rancher hesitated. He wanted to approach her, but he also respected privacy. Some people didn't like strangers intruding on their space. He nudged his horse forward slowly, keeping his distance, watching her struggle with a board that refused to stay in place. She crouched low, pressing the plank down with her knee while trying to hammer it in at the same time. It wobbled and threatened to fall, but she didn't give up. She adjusted it again and hit the nail with careful precision. A small smile appeared on her face when it finally stayed put. He could see her relief. It was a small victory, but it mattered. Time passed, and the rancher continued to observe her. He noticed how methodically she worked, how she paused to rest, taking small sips from a water bottle she carried with her. She seemed used to hard labor, accustomed to working with what she had. There was a rhythm to her actions, a balance between patience and effort. Every now and then, she would look around, as if to make sure no one was watching, though the rancher kept himself hidden behind a line of bushes and distant trees. He wondered what had brought her here, to this isolated place with nothing but broken boards and determination. He imagined her story, filled with challenges and choices that had led her to this moment. She had a strength that was quiet but undeniable, and it made him respect her. The woman worked for hours under the hot sun, moving boards from one spot to another, sometimes having to remeasure or reattach them. Her movements were steady, though fatigue was beginning to show. She wiped her forehead again, her hand leaving a streak of dust across her skin. She looked up, glancing at the horizon as if seeking guidance from the wide, open sky. The rancher noticed the way she paused, taking a moment to breathe in the warm, dry air, and it made him think about how much courage it takes to face challenges alone. She had no one to rely on right now except herself, and she carried the weight of that responsibility with quiet determination. As she continued her work, a gust of wind blew across the field, rustling the boards and making some of them shift slightly. She rushed to steady them, gripping the rough wood with both hands. One of the smaller boards cracked under the pressure, and she frowned. Picking it up, she examined it carefully. It wasn't perfect, but it could still serve a purpose. She set it aside, adjusted her other boards, and continued, improvising with the materials she had. The rancher could see her mind working just as fast as her hands, constantly planning the next move, finding solutions to problems as they appeared. He felt a growing admiration for her ability to persist without complaint. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The woman worked with renewed focus, knowing she had to finish the basic frame before darkness came. Her hands were sore, her arms ached, but she refused to stop. Every board she placed was a step closer to safety, a step closer to comfort in this remote place. The rancher watched as she climbed onto a small pile of boards to reach the higher part of the shelter, balancing carefully. He held his breath as she hammered a nail into the roof, wincing when the board shifted slightly. She adjusted quickly, steadying it, and finally it seemed to hold. Relief washed over her face, and she let out a small laugh of satisfaction. It was a human moment, raw and genuine, and it made him smile from behind his concealment. He remembered similar moments from his own life, when he had faced challenges that seemed overwhelming, and the satisfaction of overcoming them with his own effort. He thought about how important it was to recognize determination when you saw it, even from afar. This woman, working alone with broken boards under the hot sun, displayed a resilience he rarely encountered. It was inspiring, and he felt compelled to help, though he wasn't sure how to do so without overstepping. He stayed hidden, watching her work, giving her space and considering his next move carefully. The woman finally stepped back to look at her work in full. The shelter was far from perfect, uneven, and makeshift, but it was functional. It could protect her from the sun, perhaps even from the wind at night. She placed her hands on her hips, breathing heavily, her clothes sticking to her back with sweat. She smiled faintly, proud of what she had accomplished with limited resources. For a moment, she allowed herself to enjoy the success, however small. The rancher continued to watch, moved by her dedication and skill. He wondered if he should approach her or continue observing from a distance. He felt a quiet urge to help, to offer some of the lumber he kept at his ranch, but he wanted to do it in a way that respected her independence. As the evening light softened, the rancher made a decision. Tomorrow, he would ride over with some proper boards and tools, enough to strengthen the shelter without taking away her effort or pride. For now, he stayed back, watching as she began to gather the remaining scattered boards for one final adjustment. She hummed softly to herself, a tune carried by the gentle evening breeze, unaware of the observer in the distance. The rancher felt a sense of quiet admiration, knowing that acts of courage and determination often went unnoticed. He decided he would not let her efforts go unsupported for long. He would find a way to help, without diminishing the pride she clearly felt in what she had built. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the field. The woman finished the final adjustments to her shelter, stepping back to assess it one more time. She nodded to herself, satisfied that it would serve her for now. She wiped her hands on her pants and began to gather her few belongings, preparing to settle nearby for the night. The rancher, still hidden, watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and respect. He felt a growing sense of responsibility to assist her, knowing that a small act of help could make a big difference. With that thought, he quietly turned his horse and began to ride back toward his ranch, already planning how he could offer the lumber and tools she would need the next day. The first day had ended, but the story of their meeting was only beginning, a story of quiet strength, human perseverance, and the promise of unexpected kindness. The next morning, the rancher woke early, long before the sun had fully risen. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of dew on dry grass. He saddled his horse and rode quietly toward the part of his land where he had seen the woman the day before. The field looked different in the soft morning light. Shadows stretched across the uneven ground, and the broken boards from her makeshift shelter caught the first rays of sunlight. She was already at work, moving carefully between pieces of wood, adjusting them as if the shelter were a puzzle she was determined to solve. The rancher slowed his horse again, observing from a safe distance, not wanting to startle her. He felt a mixture of curiosity and respect. She was working alone with nothing but her own effort and determination, and that alone was remarkable. The woman paused for a moment, resting her hands on her knees and taking in the quiet morning. Her hair was tied back loosely, though strands had escaped and stuck to her sweaty forehead. She breathed heavily but deliberately, letting the calm of the morning wash over her before she continued. She picked up a warped board and examined it carefully, turning it in her hands. It was too bent to fit in the spot she wanted, so she set it aside and chose another. Her actions were deliberate, thoughtful. She was not just trying to complete a shelter, she was building it in a way that made sense to her. Every board was tested, every nail measured, and every placement planned. Her care and persistence spoke of someone used to facing challenges and solving them with patience. The rancher noticed how she worked, making small improvements to her structure. She had started yesterday with little more than broken boards and determination, yet now the frame was stronger and more defined. He could see the thoughtfulness in how she measured each board before hammering it in place, ensuring the shelter would withstand more than just a few nights. It reminded him of the importance of preparation, and he admired the skill with which she approached the task. Every time a board wobbled or a nail bent, she would pause, breathe, and try again. Her persistence was quiet but unwavering. Hours passed as she worked alone, the sun climbing higher in the sky. The rancher watched her intermittently, noting her strength and focus. At times, she would stop and step back, squinting at the structure to see if everything was aligned. Other times, she crouched down, repositioning a plank or tightening a loose nail. Even when a small board fell, she didn't express frustration. Instead, she adapted quickly, adjusting and continuing. It was a rhythm that reflected her resilience. The rancher thought about how rare it was to see such determination, and he felt a quiet sense of admiration. He realized he wanted to help, but he still hesitated, unsure how to approach without seeming intrusive. The woman finally took a short break, sitting on a rock a few feet away from her shelter. She took a small sip from a water bottle and let out a quiet sigh. She looked around the open field, her eyes scanning the horizon. The rancher, still hidden behind a small grove of trees, observed the way she paused and allowed herself a moment of reflection. He realized that she had probably been through difficult times to end up here, working alone with limited resources. The field was vast and empty, yet she seemed committed to making this place her own. He could sense her determination to succeed on her own terms, and he respected that. After a few minutes, she stood up and returned to her work. Her movements were careful and measured. She picked up a long board, testing its weight and alignment. It was slightly heavier than the others, but she managed it with steady hands. She adjusted it to fit the frame, then hit a nail into the wood, listening to the satisfying thud as it sank in. She stepped back, hands on her hips, examining the placement. For a moment, she seemed unsure, tilting her head and squinting at the board. Then she nodded, satisfied, and moved on to the next task. Her focus was intense, and it was clear that she was not willing to compromise on quality, even if it took more time. The rancher thought about how much effort she was putting in and how little she had to work with. He decided that tomorrow he would bring some additional boards, enough to help her strengthen the shelter without taking away her work. For now, he remained hidden, watching quietly. He noticed the way she adapted when boards didn't fit, the careful way she measured each nail placement, and the way she tested each section of the structure. It was a skillful, patient approach, one that reflected both intelligence and perseverance. Midday approached, and the sun grew hotter, making the field shimmer with heat. The woman paused to drink water again and wiped the sweat from her face with her sleeve. She glanced around, perhaps wondering if anyone was nearby, though the rancher remained careful not to reveal himself. She then returned to her work, continuing to hammer and adjust, her movements methodical. Every small correction brought the shelter closer to completion, and every effort demonstrated her resourcefulness. The rancher admired her ability to remain calm and focused, even under the weight of a challenging task. As she worked, she began to hum softly, a tune that carried lightly on the breeze. It was a quiet, human sound that contrasted with the harsh surroundings. The rancher listened and felt a sense of connection, even from a distance. The woman's humming suggested she was used to solitude and had learned to find comfort in her own company. He thought about how difficult it must be to remain motivated without support, yet she continued, step by step, toward her goal. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew across the field, catching some of the loose boards and shifting them slightly. The woman reacted quickly, steadying the boards with both hands and repositioning them carefully. One board cracked slightly under pressure, but she adjusted it without hesitation. She did not let the setback deter her, and the rancher could see the determination in her eyes. She was solving problems as they appeared, and each solution reflected her skill and patience. Time moved on, and the field began to glow with the warm tones of late afternoon. The woman was visibly tired, but she refused to slow down. She moved between boards and nails, checking alignment and stability. Her movements were slower now, but no less deliberate. She had developed a rhythm, a way of balancing effort with caution. The rancher, still observing quietly, was impressed by her stamina. She had endured hours of work in the sun and remained committed to the task at hand. As evening approached, the rancher decided to move closer, keeping to the shadows to avoid startling her. He wanted to gauge whether she might accept help if offered, but he did not want to interfere prematurely. He watched as she lifted a large board and placed it carefully, testing its stability before hammering it into place. She paused for a moment, stepping back to examine her progress. The sun cast long shadows across the field, highlighting the shelter's uneven but functional structure. The rancher could see her pride and satisfaction, small but evident in the way she held herself. Finally, the woman took a step back and surveyed her work. The shelter was far from perfect, with crooked lines and uneven planks, but it was standing. It could provide shade, shelter from wind, and a sense of safety in the open field. She wiped her hands on her pants and took a deep breath, letting herself enjoy the accomplishment. The rancher, still hidden, felt a sense of admiration and quiet pride. He realized that tomorrow, when he approached her with additional boards, he would be supporting someone capable, not rescuing someone helpless. He felt a growing respect for her determination and resilience. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the woman began to gather her tools and remaining boards. She arranged them neatly beside the shelter, planning to return the next day to continue her work. She looked around the field one last time, her eyes scanning the horizon, before she settled down nearby to rest for the night. The rancher watched her, knowing that she was stronger and more resourceful than most. He felt a quiet responsibility to help her in a way that would respect her independence, knowing that the right kind of support could make her efforts more sustainable. The evening air grew cooler, and the woman adjusted her position to rest comfortably near the shelter. She had accomplished a great deal today, and although she was tired, there was satisfaction in her work. The rancher, mounting his horse carefully, decided to leave for now, planning to return in the morning with the materials she would need. As he rode away, he felt a quiet sense of anticipation for the meeting to come, knowing that small acts of kindness could make a big difference in someone's life. The day had ended, but the story of their connection and the shelter's future was only beginning. The next morning, the rancher rode out early again. The sun was just rising, painting the horizon in soft shades of gold and pink. The field was quiet except for the occasional chirp of birds and the rustle of leaves in the light breeze. The shelter he had watched being built for 2 days stood in the middle of the field, uneven but sturdy, a testament to the woman's determination. He could see her already at work, hammering a board into place, her movements deliberate and careful. She looked different in the morning light, softer and more peaceful, yet still focused and strong. The rancher took a deep breath and nudged his horse forward slowly. Today he decided he would approach her. He wanted to offer help, but in a way that respected her effort and independence. He reminded himself to be patient and polite, knowing that trust could not be forced. He kept his voice low and friendly as he spoke when he was close enough. "Good morning," he called softly, letting the sound carry across the field without startling her. The woman froze for a moment, eyes wide as she turned toward the voice. She gripped her hammer tighter, unsure who was approaching. Her heart beat faster, a mix of caution and curiosity. She had been alone for 2 days, relying on her own skills, and the sudden presence of a stranger brought a moment of uncertainty. The rancher slowed his horse further, keeping a safe distance. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his tone calm and sincere. "I just wanted to say I've been watching your work. You've done a remarkable job." The woman's brow furrowed slightly. She didn't know if he was being genuine or just curious. Still, there was something about the calmness in his voice, the respect in the way he kept his distance that made her relax just a little. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but cautious. I've been working on it for a while." The rancher smiled, noticing the sweat on her brow and the dirt on her clothes. "I can see that," he said. "It's not easy to build something like this alone. If you don't mind, I thought I might bring some boards and tools to help strengthen it. I have some extra at my ranch." The woman hesitated. Accepting help was not something she did lightly. She had been independent for a long time, used to relying only on herself. But she studied him for a moment, noticing his genuine respect for her effort. He wasn't trying to take over, he wanted to support her. Slowly, she nodded. I'd appreciate that, she said softly. It's just hard to get everything together on my own. The rancher dismounted and led his horse closer, careful to stay non-threatening. I'll be careful not to disturb your work, he said. I just want to make sure the shelter can hold up for you. He glanced at the structure, noting the crooked boards and places where extra support would help. Some of these boards are a bit weak. I have some stronger lumber you could use if you'd like. The woman examined him briefly, then looked at the boards she had already used. She knew she needed help, and his offer seemed honest. That would be helpful, she said, a small smile breaking through. It was the first real connection they had, a silent acknowledgement that her efforts were seen and appreciated. Together, they walked toward the shelter. The rancher pointed to a few boards that were particularly wobbly and suggested better placement. He did not take the tools from her hands. He only offered advice, letting her make the decisions. She followed his suggestions carefully, listening and adjusting as needed. There was a natural rhythm to their work, a quiet cooperation that did not require many words. As they worked side by side, the woman began to share small details about herself. She explained why she had come to this area and how she had managed to gather the boards she was using. The rancher listened intently, asking gentle questions to show he was interested without prying. The conversation flowed easily, carried by the sound of hammers and shifting boards. Each word built trust, each shared glance strengthened their connection. The morning passed, and the shelter slowly began to take shape with the rancher's help. He handed her boards and nails when needed, but let her lead the construction. She measured and positioned the boards with care, sometimes pausing to adjust something the rancher had suggested. He watched her closely, noticing the small details, the way she tested each plank before hammering, the way she wiped sweat from her brow, and the subtle determination in her eyes. They took a short break mid-morning, sitting on a nearby log. The woman sipped water while the rancher adjusted his hat against the sun. "You've done a lot already," he said. "It's impressive how much you've accomplished alone." She shrugged, smiling faintly. "I've had to learn to do things on my own. Sometimes it's easier to rely on yourself." Her eyes softened as she looked at the shelter. "But it's nice to have help, too." The rancher nodded, understanding her balance of independence and cautious trust. "It's not always easy to let someone in, especially when you've managed on your own for a long time," he said. "I respect that. I just want to help without taking over." The woman appreciated that. It was rare to meet someone who offered support without judgment or expectation. She picked up a strong plank and handed it to him. "Here," she said. "Could you hold this while I line it up?" He took it carefully, and they worked together to position it correctly. The plank fit neatly, reinforcing the side of the shelter that had been most unstable. She stepped back, examining the improvement. A sense of relief and satisfaction washed over her. "That's better," she said. "Thank you." As the afternoon sun climbed higher, they continued working. Their conversation became lighter, filled with small stories and observations about the land. The woman talked about the plants she had noticed nearby and the way the wind moved across the field. The rancher shared memories of his own experiences with building and maintaining structures on his land. Through their shared labor, a quiet bond grew. They were learning to rely on one another while respecting each person's strength and independence. At one point, a small board slipped, and the woman caught it just in time. She laughed softly, and the rancher chuckled along with her. It was a small moment of connection, a shared experience that lightened the work and made the day feel less burdensome. They continued, side by side, moving boards, measuring, and hammering, the rhythm of their efforts blending seamlessly. By late afternoon, the basic frame of the shelter was much stronger. The crooked lines of the previous days had been reinforced, and the structure now stood sturdier against the elements. The woman paused to wipe her hands on her pants and stepped back, examining their work. She smiled, genuinely pleased with the progress. The rancher, standing beside her, felt a sense of satisfaction, too. It was rare to see such determination matched by careful guidance and cooperation. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the light softened, casting long shadows across the field. The woman adjusted a final board and stepped back to admire the shelter. "It feels more secure now," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. "I couldn't have done this alone." The rancher smiled, tipping his hat. "You did most of the work," he said. "I just helped a little." "It's yours." She looked at him, grateful and thoughtful. "Thank you," she said simply. It was a word filled with sincerity, a quiet acknowledgement of trust forming between them. They stood together for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky, a shared sense of accomplishment surrounding them. The evening approached, and the field grew cooler. They gathered the remaining boards and tools, arranging them neatly beside the shelter. The woman was exhausted, but her eyes shone with satisfaction. The rancher mounted his horse again, preparing to ride back to his ranch. "I'll come back tomorrow with a few more boards," he said. "We can finish reinforcing the roof." She nodded, smiling. "I'd like that." "Thank you for helping and for not taking over." He tipped his hat, a quiet acknowledgement of her independence and strength. "I respect your work," he said. "You've done an incredible job." As he rode away, the woman watched him go, feeling a sense of trust she had not expected. For the first time, she realized that help could arrive without diminishing her effort. She settled near the shelter, preparing for the evening, her mind at ease for the first time in days. The bond had begun, built on respect, patience, and shared labor. Tomorrow promised more progress, more cooperation, and the quiet reassurance that she was not entirely alone. The day ended with the sun disappearing beyond the horizon, leaving the field bathed in soft twilight. The shelter stood sturdily, and a new connection had formed in its shadow, a connection that would continue to grow with time, effort, and mutual respect. The next morning, the rancher woke before dawn, the sky still painted with soft shades of blue and gold. He saddled his horse quietly and loaded several boards and tools into a small cart he had prepared the night before. He had thought carefully about what to bring: sturdy lumber, nails, and a few basic tools that could help reinforce the shelter without taking over the work the woman had already done. Today, he was determined not only to help, but to show respect for the effort she had already put in. As he rode across the field, the morning air was fresh and cool, carrying the scent of grass and soil. He could see the shelter from a distance, its uneven lines softened by the early light. The woman was already at work, carrying a small board toward the frame. She looked focused, moving with the rhythm she had established over the past few days. The rancher slowed his horse, observing her for a moment before approaching. He wanted to make sure his presence was welcome. "Good morning," he called softly, keeping his voice calm. The woman paused, turning toward him. There was a brief hesitation in her eyes, a cautious curiosity. She had grown used to working alone, and sudden appearances were still surprising. "Good morning," she replied, her voice steady but quiet. "I brought some boards and tools," he said gently. "I thought they might help make the shelter stronger, only if you want, of course." He kept his distance, letting her assess him before stepping closer. The woman studied the boards he had brought. They were straight, sturdy, and perfect for reinforcing the weaker parts of the shelter. She noticed his careful approach. He wasn't rushing in, he wasn't taking over. He was offering help, leaving the choice to her. She nodded slowly. "That would be helpful," she said. "Thank you for bringing them." The rancher dismounted and began unloading the boards and tools, laying them neatly near the shelter. He picked up a hammer and a few nails, but he didn't hand them to her immediately. Instead, he waited for her direction. "Where would you like me to start?" he asked. His tone was patient, inviting collaboration rather than giving orders. The woman took a deep breath and walked toward the side of the shelter that had been wobbliest yesterday. "Here," she said, pointing. "These boards need to be reinforced, and the roof could use a few stronger supports." She handed him a board and a few nails. "You can help hold this while I line it up." Together, they worked in silence at first, the sounds of hammering and shifting wood filling the quiet morning. The rancher held the board steady as the woman measured and adjusted. She tapped a few nails into place, testing the fit carefully before driving them fully in. Every movement was deliberate, a small step toward making the shelter safer and more secure. He admired her focus, and she began to appreciate the way he worked carefully alongside her, respecting her decisions. As the sun climbed higher, their rhythm grew steady. The rancher would hold a board, she would measure and position it, and together they hammered nails into place. Occasionally, one of the boards would not fit perfectly. The woman would pause, study it, then adjust, while the rancher offered a quiet suggestion if needed. "Maybe this angle would hold better," he would say softly. She would consider it, nodding, and then make the adjustment herself. It was a dance of cooperation, each learning from the other while respecting individual skill and knowledge. During a break, they sat on a log near the shelter, drinking water. The woman wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. I didn't think I'd ever get this much help, she said softly, glancing at the pile of boards and tools. Most people either take over or don't notice at all, the rancher smiled. I wanted to help without taking away your effort, he said. You've done incredible work already. I just want to make it last longer. His words were sincere, and she could feel it. There was no judgment, no expectation, just respect and support. The woman nodded, appreciating the thoughtfulness behind his actions. Thank you, she said, more sincerely this time. I didn't think anyone would notice what I've been doing here. She paused, looking at the partly completed shelter. It means a lot that you did. After a few minutes, they returned to work. The rancher handed her boards and held them steady as she positioned them. Sometimes she would hand him a nail, and he would tap it gently into the wood, letting her complete the task. There was a quiet understanding between them, a balance of effort and respect. Each nail hammered, each board placed, strengthened both the shelter and the trust forming between them. Hours passed, and the structure gradually took shape. The walls were straighter, the roof more secure, and the shelter now seemed capable of standing against the wind and rain. The woman stepped back frequently, examining their progress with careful eyes. The rancher noticed the small smile that appeared each time she saw improvement. It was a smile of quiet pride, the satisfaction of someone who had worked hard and seen the results of their effort. As they worked, the woman began to talk more. She shared small details about herself, how she had learned to handle tools, why she had come to this part of the land, and the challenges she had faced along the way. The rancher listened, asking gentle questions and sharing some of his own experiences as well. Their conversation flowed naturally, carried by the rhythm of work. Through shared labor and gentle words, a bond grew, quiet but strong, built on trust, respect, and the satisfaction of working together. The sun climbed high and then began to descend, casting a warm golden glow across the field. The shelter was almost complete. The strongest boards were in place, reinforcing the weak sections and creating a roof that would provide shade and protection. The woman stepped back and ran her hands over the rough wood, testing it with gentle pressure. It held. She smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. The rancher looked at her and nodded approvingly. It's holding well now, he said. You've done an amazing job. She looked at him, grateful and thoughtful. We did it together, she said. It was more than a statement about the shelter. It was an acknowledgement of the teamwork and trust that had grown over the past 2 days. The evening approached and the field grew cooler. They gathered the remaining tools and extra boards, stacking them neatly beside the shelter for future use. The woman's hands were sore, but her eyes shone with satisfaction. The shelter, once fragile and uneven, now stood sturdy, a safe place she could rely on. The rancher mounted his horse again, preparing to ride back to his land. I'll return tomorrow with a few more boards for the roof, he said. We can make it even stronger and more comfortable. The woman nodded, smiling. I'd like that. Thank you for helping me and not taking over my work. He tipped his hat, a quiet acknowledgement of her strength and independence. It's your shelter, he said. I just want to make sure it lasts. As he rode away, the woman settled near the shelter, looking over the work they had accomplished together. She felt a sense of calm and security she hadn't known in days. The shelter was more than wood and nails. It was proof that cooperation, trust, and respect could make difficult tasks possible. She realized that accepting help didn't mean losing independence. It could mean achieving more than she could on her own. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the field bathed in soft twilight. The shelter stood firmly, and the bond between the two people had grown quietly but strongly, built on shared effort and understanding. The evening was calm, filled with the quiet satisfaction of work well done and the anticipation of the next day. The next morning, the woman woke early, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the tall grass. She felt a quiet excitement, knowing that today the shelter would be finished. After 2 days of careful construction and the rancher's supportive help, the structure now stood sturdier than she had imagined possible. She stretched and breathed deeply, feeling the crisp morning air fill her lungs, and then gathered the remaining boards and tools needed for the final touches. She moved with purpose, each step confident, each movement deliberate. The rancher arrived shortly afterward, riding quietly into the field. He had brought a few additional boards and nails to reinforce the roof and the corners, ensuring the shelter could last through weather and time. As he approached, The woman waved, a small smile on her face. "Good morning," she called. "Good morning," he replied, tipping his hat politely. "Ready to finish this?" "I am," she said. Her voice held a mixture of pride and determination. She handed him a plank to start with, and together they began their work. There was a calm rhythm to their movements, a natural flow born from the cooperation of the previous days. Each board they placed strengthened the shelter, each nail driven into the wood solidifying the structure. The morning passed quickly as they worked side by side. The rancher held boards steady while the woman measured and adjusted, and then she would hand him nails or suggest placements. There was no tension, no need to hurry. The pace was deliberate, each action considered. Occasionally, they paused to step back and examine their progress, nodding in quiet satisfaction at the improvements. The shelter had transformed from a fragile, uneven frame into a strong, functional structure, capable of providing safety and comfort. As they worked, their conversation flowed easily. The woman spoke about her past experiences, how she had learned to handle tools, how she had traveled to this place, and how proud she was of the shelter she had begun on her own. The rancher listened attentively, sharing stories of his own life on the land, tales of maintaining fences, tending animals, and building structures to last. Their words intertwined with the sounds of hammering and shifting wood, creating a backdrop of cooperation and understanding. By midday, the main frame of the shelter was complete. The roof was solid, the walls straightened and reinforced, and the corners sturdy. The woman ran her hands along the wood, testing its stability. It held perfectly. She stepped back, her eyes bright with satisfaction. "It's finally done," she said, a small laugh of relief escaping her lips. The rancher smiled, nodding. "It looks amazing. You've done incredible work. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice soft but sincere. "I know I did most of it, but you helped make it stronger, safer. I appreciate that." He shook his head gently. "You did all the hard work. I just helped where I could. The shelter is yours, built by your hands. I'm glad I could be part of it, that's all." His words were honest, and she could feel the sincerity behind them. They spent a few minutes arranging the remaining tools neatly beside the shelter. Each item had a place, each piece of wood stacked carefully for potential future repairs. The woman took a step back, surveying the work. The field stretched out around them, peaceful and quiet, yet the shelter now stood as a symbol of resilience, determination, and human kindness. The woman picked up a small piece of cloth and used it to wipe the sweat and dust from her face. She smiled at the rancher, a warmth in her eyes that had grown over the past days. "Thank you for being patient," she said, "for respecting my work and my space. That means more than I can say." The rancher tipped his hat again, a quiet gesture of acknowledgement. "You earned it. You've worked hard and your effort deserves respect. Helping you doesn't take away from that." For a moment they stood in silence, simply appreciating the shelter and the peaceful field around them. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the soft scent of earth and wood. Birds chirped in the distance, and the warm sunlight cast gentle shadows across the structure. There was a calm satisfaction in the air, the kind that comes from a day of meaningful work completed and a goal achieved. The woman finally spoke, her voice thoughtful. "I never thought I could build something so solid on my own. I didn't have much, but I made it work, and now it feels like this place belongs to me." She looked around, eyes bright with pride and accomplishment. "It's more than a shelter. It's proof that I can do hard things, even when I feel alone." The rancher nodded. "You've shown incredible strength, and sometimes accepting a little help doesn't take away from that. It makes the effort last longer." She considered his words and realized they were true. She had been hesitant to accept help, worried it might diminish her achievement, but she now understood that true support does not overshadow effort. It amplifies it. The shelter stood as proof of that balance, her determination paired with his assistance, a collaboration built on trust and respect. The afternoon passed as they made final adjustments. They reinforced a few corners, checked the stability of the roof, and cleared debris from around the shelter. The woman tested the entrance and pushed gently on the walls. Everything held firmly. She laughed softly with relief. "It's perfect," she said. The rancher smiled, proud of the work they had done together. "You should be proud. You built something lasting here." The woman glanced at him, her smile warm. "I am," she said, "and I'm glad you were here to help me make it even better." As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the field, the woman decided to take a short rest near the shelter. She sat on a small log, breathing in the fresh air and feeling the satisfaction of accomplishment. The rancher remained nearby, leaning against his horse, content to watch quietly. There was no rush, no need for words. They simply enjoyed the calm of the moment. Finally, the woman spoke again. "I wasn't sure about accepting help at first," she admitted. "I've been on my own for a long time, and it's hard to let someone in, but now I see it can make a difference." The rancher nodded gently. "It's not easy to trust, especially when you've managed alone. But sometimes, a little support can make a big difference without taking away your independence." She smiled, feeling the truth in his words. The shelter wasn't just a place of wood and nails. It was a symbol of cooperation, respect, and quiet human kindness. And the rancher's support had shown her that trust, when given carefully, could lead to results beyond what she could achieve alone. As the evening approached, they began to gather their tools one last time. The shelter stood tall and firm, a safe place that could withstand sun, wind, and rain. The woman's pride in her work was clear, and the rancher's respect for her effort had grown even stronger. They had worked side by side, building more than just a structure. They had built a connection, a shared understanding of effort, trust, and mutual respect. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the field. The woman looked at the shelter one final time, her heart full of accomplishment. "It's finished," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I did this, and now it's mine." The rancher nodded, tipping his hat in acknowledgement. "You did it. And it will last because of the care and effort you put into it." The woman smiled again, feeling a sense of calm she hadn't known in days. She had started with nothing but broken boards and determination, and now she had a sturdy shelter, a safe place, and a quiet understanding that help can come without diminishing one's effort. The field was peaceful, and the bond between the two of them was firm, built on patience, trust, and shared effort. As night fell and stars began to appear, the woman settled near her shelter, reflecting on what had happened. She realized that strength was not just about working alone. It was about knowing when to accept support, when to trust, and when to keep going with determination. The shelter was a symbol of that balance, and the rancher's assistance had been a part of that journey. She felt gratitude, pride, and a quiet hope for the days ahead. The rancher, riding back toward his own land, glanced over his shoulder at the shelter. He smiled, satisfied that he had helped without taking over, and that the woman's determination had been respected. The shelter would stand strong, a testament to her effort and their shared cooperation. He knew that the field would remain peaceful, the work completed, and a connection formed that neither of them would forget. The night settled over the field, calm and serene. The shelter stood firm under the stars, the woman resting nearby with a sense of pride and peace. The rancher had returned home, carrying with him the quiet satisfaction of having supported someone capable without diminishing her strength. And in that quiet, open field, two lives had intersected briefly but meaningfully, leaving behind a story of perseverance, trust, and shared effort that would remain long after the last board had been placed.